in today's episode, we're going to chat about how to increase your libido while trying to conceive and sexual wellness tips with our special guest, Monica Cook. Hi everyone, it's Chong here. Welcome to another episode of our Fertility Nutrition TV. Now, if you are new to our channel, make sure that you press the subscribe button and follow me at Catherine.fertilitydietitian on our Instagram. Now, today I'm very excited because I have a special guest joining me today. Her name is Monica Cook, and she's going to talk about a very important topic about sex, in specifically how to increase your libido while trying to conceive. Now, Monica is a qualified Sydney-based sex therapist and counselor holding a Master's of Sexual and Reproductive Health through the University of Sydney. She's actively involved in health and medical research and teaching. She has a private consulting practice and has many years of experience working with individuals and couples to resolve sexual issues. Now, she's also a mom of 3 young children. How amazing she is. So let us welcome Monica Cook to our show. Hello,
Thanks,
Monica.
guys.
Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Oh, so thrilled to have you here, Monica. Now, we're going to talk about sex today. I know that it's not a common topic that we openly, discuss with anyone else or not even with our doctors. So I'm really curious to know, Monica, how your journey began as a sex therapist, and why did you decide to become a sex educator as well? Can you tell us a little bit more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So when I first stepped into the world of health education, which was sort of my way into this area, I discovered that we kind of did some things really well, but we did some things really poorly in the realm of health education. And in particular, this area of sex and fertility, we just didn't do well. And I kept on seeing so many people struggling because of it. People were unsure as to what was normal. People are lost in knowing what to do about particular issues. And just everywhere I looked, people were drowning in shame, in confusion, in misinformation, and just really unsure as to where to go for help with regards to these things. So a passion started to grow in me as a result, just to bridge that gap, to really start to understand, like, what is the science saying and how do I bring that to people in a way that is going to help them? And so I kind of started in the education space, because obviously that's a way that you can bridge that gap and share with others and some of those concepts and some of the theory from research into the general public space. But then I started to also overlay that with therapy, because it's really in therapy that head knowledge actually translates to heart for people. It's the way in which it can go from a concept that somebody knows into an actual practice that will promote health and sexual wellness for them. So I started out in the education realm and then realized I really needed the therapy piece to help people put that into practice. And it's sort of just been taking off from there. And I just love it. So I love seeing people's lives transformed and love having people ask me questions and to suddenly realize that they're normal after all, and just to know that there's help available in this space.
Wow. So inspiring. I guess for me, personally, I grew up, I was born in Malaysia from a very traditional Chinese family and migrated to Australia for about 20 years now. I know that certainly in my culture, right, like I say, it's not a common topic that was brought up. So in your practice, what's your thoughts about how general perceptions in terms of sexual wellness, or if someone having sexual difficulty issue, what is kind of the taboo or the general perception in terms of the current culture and society?
Yeah, there are so many things that people struggle with. I think overwhelmingly the whole of sex is a bit of a taboo. The fact that you might be struggling with sex is the taboo piece. sex itself is like promoted everywhere. On TV, we're all very happy to laugh about it and talk about it if it doesn't have anything to do with us. But if there's something that is happening in a core level, a dysfunction or a challenge, that is the taboo piece. That is the part that nobody shares. And there's a lot of sort of people put a particular face out there, or they say their sex life is fine, but I actually get to see the secret life of what's going on behind people's bedroom doors. And the reality is that it's not this thing that's just supernatural, because people think it's really natural, not supernatural, but people think it's very easy and it should come naturally, and it shouldn't take any work or effort or thought. But that's not true. It's a kind of art form, really. It takes a lot of knowledge and it takes a lot of know-how. You've got two very unique individuals trying to find things that are pleasurable for both parties, and or if you have more, you're trying to find all of these, like, kind of you're trying to integrate to a bunch of different preferences and positions and body types, and it's not easy. It's not something that it just comes naturally often, and there are a lot of road bumps and obstacles that people can hit, and that's normal. And so I think if people realize that's a normal experience, actually, to have to work at it and to have to try new things and possibly fail at different positions, and that's actually part of the joy of this experience and this journey, if they can view it that way, which our society doesn't. So there's a lot of pressure on people to get it right, to look good, to make it look like Hollywood. It just doesn't work that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you know, I'm a fertility dietitian, so I mainly work with clients or couple who are trying to conceive, and many of them, of course, suffer from tremendous amount of stress, right? Dealing with infertility issue, it may take longer time to get conceived as well. So just how common do you see couples who really struggle with fertility issue, but also struggle with their sexual, health as well? Like,
it's very common. I mean, my business itself is called Reconceived. Partly because I love the idea of people rethinking the way that they approach sex, but the other part of that is because I do a lot of work with couples actually trying to conceive and struggling to do so because of sexual dysfunction. And it's interesting with this area because it actually works in two ways. You have fertility issues that can impact on a previously robust sex life, right? So the kind of journey through IVF or the journey through subfertility can really impact on people's sex lives, but you can also have it the other way, where sexual dysfunction, as you can imagine, can also impact on people's capacity to be fertile or to get pregnant, to conceive. You might have erectile dysfunction or ejaculatory issues, or something called vaginismus, where there's the pelvic floor muscle that's contracted and doesn't allow for penetration without a lot of pain. And so all of these things actually, they kind of integrate. The fertility and sexual dysfunction are sort of these two areas that really come together. And I see a lot of people, I think, in that space at that time when they're trying to conceive, because often if there's been a difficulty that has happened before, they may have ignored that for a long time, and it's not until they're trying to conceive or they've got a particular goal that they actually decide, okay, we're going to do something about this now, because we need to be able to get to our goal, and this is getting in the way. But up until that time, they may have left it for many years. So I do see a lot of couples at that point where they're trying to conceive, because I think it's the point at which they have to really face the issues front on, head on. And also they're starting to think too, like, once we have children, our lives are just about to get super busy. So maybe we have to invest some time into our sex lives to make sure that once the kids come along, we're still remaining intimate and we're still a partnership and a family unit that can support kids, because we're remaining physically intimate. So it kind of brings a lot of things to people's attention, and I see them usually at that point, or many couples at that point.
I think that one of the things, so we actually asked our audience, right? Please submit a question. So one of the questions that I keep saying that a lot of audience are interested to know is how to increase that libido, especially trying to conceive, because I'm sure that many couples feel like sex become a chore rather than something that to enjoy, because every month, for example, you need to time exactly when to have sex, and then for many couples also feel like they have sex just to because to have a baby. So could you tell us a little bit more? Why is it potentially, when trying to conceive, the libido can be a factor for many couples?
Yeah, great question. I mean, there are so many different factors to consider when it comes to libido. Sometimes it's biological. So, there might be natural hormone fluctuations that, particularly for women, that mean that there are certain times of their cycle that they may naturally not be interested in sex. Also, if they're undergoing fertility treatment, there may be various drugs or surgeries that they've had to undertake that either impacts on the hormone levels or also just makes sex really uncomfortable or painful. So that's another reason why sometimes this journey can really affect people's kind of willingness to go there. And then you've got, from a psychological perspective, as you said a moment ago, couples put a lot of pressure on themselves to conceive. So sex actually goes from something that they're enjoying and it's the journey, it's for them, to something that's super goal oriented. And when that happens, when suddenly sex becomes a goal, it means that there's also the potential for failure. And so there's a lot of performance pressure that then gets placed in that space of, we need to get here. And if we don't get here, that's scary. The minute there's a performance that you're needing to kind of do, or you need to kind of enact this to get somewhere, anxiety kicks in. And when there's anxiety, that impacts directly on libido, because as you'd imagine, in an anxious place, your body is ready to fight a lion. It's not ready to have sex. It's very vulnerable. You don't want to be having sex while a lion is coming after you, right? Yeah. Anxiety and a libido don't kind of go together very well. And in light of that as well, depression, chronic stress, all of that impacts on libido and cortisol levels that are released as a result. For the same reason, your body is in fight or flight. So the last thing it's going to be wanting to do is invest that energy and biological functions that are supporting sex and arousal. So it's really going to be waiting for you to be free of that threat and in a relaxed and safe space. So anything that you can do, like relaxation and making sure you sleep well and all those things, which I'll get into in a moment, that's why those things help, because you can't be in an anxious space and also expect libido to kind of be present. The other thing is, if there's a goal, couples tend to rush through to that goal and their focus is really on getting pregnant, and they totally miss the other person and they totally miss the idea of pleasure, and it becomes really mechanical and super planned, and they disconnect emotionally. They're not even there in the room together. Even relationally, things can get a little bit tense as a result too. So there's so many different layers in my job that I have to unpack to try and figure out what is at the core of what's going on here. So with your practice, like in your consultations, do you tend to see more impact largely on women, or it can be for men as well? Yeah, it can, absolutely. I mean, it impacts them differently, I think. But I do see that, for instance, the performance pressure, the anxiety can actually be directly linked then to erectile dysfunction for guys. There's so much pressure put on them. Obviously, if they can't ejaculate, or if they don't have an erection, that whole issue of conception is dependent on them being able to do that. And so they're kind of forcing themselves to have these erections when maybe they're not. They're stressed, or they're tired, or they're exhausted, and so that kind of creates a feedback loop of anxiety, which means they're less likely to get an erection, and it kind of gets worse and worse. And for women, it's sort of it usually lands with libido, relational difficulties, self-esteem and confidence around their body and why that's not happening for them. So it can impact both people equally, and especially when it comes to the relationship as well, because often, because they're in this awkward space together, they can be arguing more often, blaming each other as to who's doing more for this goal and who's copping it harder than the other, and it can really become a kind of fiery space for them to step into. And then sex becomes an elephant in the room. So
yeah. Definitely. I guess it really takes two to tango. Same for diet as well. Yeah, it really needs the couple's efforts to work together as a team, isn't it?
That's it. That's it. And I'm always saying that. I'm always saying, like, the issue might be the fertility, the subfertility, but you guys are a team. It's you versus the fertility issue. It's not you guys at either end with the fertility issue in the middle and you're battling each other. That's not going to work. So I'm always trying to realign them so they're on the same side and remember that they're on the same side.
That's good. That's good. So could you share with us a few strategies? How can we help couples to increase their libido?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing I wanted to say is just normalize the fact that libidos do go up and down for different people, different times, and there's no officially normal libido, because I think as a society we tend to honor people with higher libidos and shame people with lower libidos. And I'm just saying, look, everyone is made differently, and it's about working with that difference. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. But I also wanted to highlight a kind of lesser known fact that in our kind of traditional way of understanding sex, we used to think that it starts with desire, leads to arousal, then you have an orgasm, then there's resolution. And so, you know, people are sort of waiting for this spontaneous desire to land in them, you know, like waking up and feeling horny. And that's the way that our Hollywood portrays desire. It's the way that we see it on porn and all sorts of things. But I wanted to mention there's a second type of desire that is really important for, and it's particularly, was done some research was done by a lady called Rosemary Basson, and she studied a lot of women in long-term relationships. And she thought, this isn't what I see with these women. And she discovered a totally new cycle, which is something called responsive desire. So she discovered that, you know, she's got this beautiful cycle. I wish I could show you, but it starts from a place of relational intimacy. So from a place where you feel close to your partner, it actually motivates the sexually neutral woman. So assuming that a woman is just actually not feeling sexual, but because she's feeling close to her partner, it motivates her to be open to sexual stimuli, which then leads to arousal in her body. And then desire kicks in all the way around the circle. Then she starts to feel like she's wanting sex once she's sort of engaged in the process. And if that's a positive experience, then it feeds back into the emotional intimacy and sends the cycle round again. Now, there are a few really important parts about this. The first one is that you don't have to feel and be waiting for the spontaneous arousal to be engaging in some form of sexual intimacy with your partner. You can engage in it and just see whether that kicks in, whether halfway through the cycle after you've kissed a little bit and you've touched, whether at that point you're experiencing responsive desire and then you're mobilized and motivated to do that. Because so many women check in with their bodies, go, do I feel like it? No. Okay, then no, we're not going to do it, right? And if you do that, you might be waiting a long time for the spontaneous arousal.
Especially after having kids as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's really important. I always say, you know, give yourself a good chance just to see and have lots of exit plans, have lots of plans that if it doesn't kick in and you're just tired and you just don't want to go further, that you can still kind of exit off in one way and, you know, still have had that connection between you and your partner. But there are other things, you know, obviously self-care is really important, good sleep, managing the stress, eating well, exercising. It's amazing how many of my clients, when they start to exercise and get their heart beating, it kind of also gets their libido going. I've had a lot of kind of clients report that. Also, the other thing I wanted to say is sometimes couples, when they're particularly in the fertility journey, they have their conversations about sex while they're having sex or beforehand or straight afterwards. And that is a bad time to have a conversation, because all the emotions, they're pretty highly emotive and they're very vulnerable in a very vulnerable state. And so I would always say, if you're going to have a chat about sex, do it outside of the sexual space. Do it the day before over coffee in the light of day and have a real conversation with each other about what's going on, rather than straight afterwards, like, oh, that wasn't so great, or beforehand, like, I hope you're not going to do this. So that's another piece of advice that I feel like a lot of people it would help them if they could allow themselves the space in the day to have those conversations. And just noticing as well, what are the accelerators, what are the brakes, what are the things that turn them on and turn them off, and really utilizing that. If you love having sex in the morning, or you love wearing something, just finding those things that help you feel like a sexual being, because that can be hard as well on the fertility journey. You might be bloated, or you might feel not yourself, or you get really down about the whole experience, and it's just it can be really hard to find those things that get you motivated to be sexual. So that's also an important piece. And I think also, as I was saying, seeing yourself as a sexual being, sexualizing yourself, realizing there's something in it for you other than just the goal of having, making a baby. Because sometimes people couple reproductive failure with failed sex, like we didn't conceive, so therefore our whole sexual experience was a failure. And that's not true. You still got stuff out of it. You still had this beautiful interaction with your partner. It doesn't have to be intercourse all the time. It can be this giving each other pleasure and being creative about what that looks like, and not just getting so fixated on sex looking like one thing. So I'm always encouraging, particularly for the fertility clients, like have lots of sexual interactions through this time. Yes, have intercourse at the fertile time, but outside of that, be sure you stay in touch, and be creative about what that looks like, and give yourself the space for it to not be a huge thing, but just what you can manage in that moment. A touch, a kiss, a holding hands, wherever the pleasure is for you in that moment. So
I love that you mentioned that. It's just like thinking about way before even trying to conceive. Back then, those emotions and feeling when, maybe the couple first met, isn't it? Like, so rather than just focus on that end goal in mind, that's going to affect that sexual relationship.
Absolutely. And you can also view it in a way that, because if you're sending a lot of positive emotions around your body, that's going to actually kind of create an environment that's conducive to conception as well. So even though you're not having sex in the fertile period, if you're having lots of sex outside of that, or enjoying sexual interaction and making each other happy and bringing each other pleasure, you're going to be bringing all those positive hormones and relaxing your body in a way that means when you get to the conception piece, your body is ready to go with that and in a good place for that. So you can see yourself as supporting, nurturing that process along by a healthy intimacy outside of that. So it
seems like it's a lot to do with the mindset as well, isn't it? Like the way connecting the science behind all these practical tips. So we have to really get our mindset in a more relaxed and stress-less space before we can help to restore that relationship, isn't it?
Yeah, because I think we underestimate the mind-body connection. There's a lot of, whenever you're on this fertility journey, there's like, do this, eat that, make sure you don't expose yourself to toxins. And, there's a lot of physical to-dos. But actually, the mind also plays a pretty huge part in this. And even I find sometimes as couples process through things like fear around pregnancy or fear around what it means to be a parent, things they've never talked about before, sometimes as we clear that away, then miraculously they get pregnant. It's almost like there was this mental block to them actually conceiving. And once they process through that, it's like their body is relieved of that burden, and they just go ahead and get pregnant. It's crazy. Don't know how it works, but it's it's a miracle.
Absolutely. Even in my practice, I love that you also mentioned about the connection between your mind, your body, your gut, and also nutrition, what you eat as well. So for over here, if you're interested about what can you actually eat in terms of helping to increase libido as well, in fact study also look at Mediterranean diet, which recently there's also a systematic review published as well, show that Mediterranean diet can also enhance both men and also women women in terms of their libido as well, and also their reproductive wellness. So absolutely, eating a Mediterranean diet not just benefit fertility, can also help with libido as well. For those couple, I suppose in particularly for women who suffer from miscarriage, for example, or felt like so disconnected, with their body, they lose trust and confidence on how the body react because of miscarriages, or maybe have an issue with their partner. Are there any advice you would further suggest? What would be the step helping women or couple to restore their sexual relationship?
Yeah, so I feel like, as you said, what can happen is there can be a real disconnect between the body, and the mind, and there's sort of like there's this fight going on between the why is my body not doing what it needs to do, and the mind that's sort of kind of almost being a critic of the body. And I think part of my job is to help women show themselves a little self-compassion, and sometimes even through mindfulness. It's more like, this is what's happening, and I'm going to have a mindful acceptance of what I'm going through. And I'm not sure if you've heard that leaves on a stream sort of mindfulness thing. It's like the thoughts come and you put it on a leaf and you let it go down the stream. It's like this constant movement of thoughts through you, rather than the rumination on one thought that constantly comes back. And so it's sort of knowing that these thoughts will come, these doubts, but you can let them go and be ready for something new. And also that idea of, I do a lot of work with the body and helping women find pleasure, because I think sometimes that goes out the window when they're really stressed, or there's this journey that they're going through. It becomes super goal oriented, and also everything else that they enjoy just disappears because they've kind of very fixated on getting here onto this thing. And actually, it's really important for them to still be able to feel pleasure in their body, and to feel what it means to be embodied, and to love being in their body. And so even small things like encouraging them in an everyday sense to find those little things that they can sit in enjoyment with, sit in the pleasure with, and just let that, welcome it into their body, like revel in the enjoyment and the pleasure of being alive, is sort of another way that I help particularly women to sort of be embodied in their everyday, and also kind of the nervous system regulated as well as they go through this stuff. So it's interesting though, I read this article on something called inferto sex syndrome, and it highlights the relationship between artificial reproductive technology failures and also kind of the intrusiveness of, so it's a kind of the combination between sexual function and the IVF journey, and how those two things kind of interact. And if you don't have that right, if you're not kind of watching yourself in a way that is kind of protecting yourself in that way and nurturing a kind of healthy outlook, it can actually impact on your fertility treatment, if that makes sense, because you're not because of all the stress and all the things that the journey has kind of brought on. It actually impacts on the outcomes of the fertility journey that you're paying a lot of money for, and so that it's this sort of interaction between those two things. So I always encourage couples that it may seem secondary, like wellness and good health and being happy and enjoying life and pleasure. It may seem like, oh no, I don't need that. But actually, when you look at the research, you do need that for this other piece to link in as well. So prioritizing well-being is just as important, and not to kind of push that aside and be the martyr. I'm going to suffer through this and kind of, But yeah.
Oh, thank you, Monica. Thank you so much for sharing so many fabulous tips with our audience today.
That's okay. No worries. Thanks for having me.
All right, Monica, can you tell us a little bit more? Where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So I've got a website called www.reconceived.com.au. So on there, there's just a little more about me, as well as how you can get in contact with me. I do online sessions as well as in-person sessions in Sydney. I'm Sydney based. And so, yeah, people can sort of access me if they're interstate via online, or if they're here in Sydney, then it's always lovely to see people in person.
Before we go, I would love to have a quick round of rapid fire questions just to get to know you. Are you ready?
Sure. I'm ready. Go for it.
All right, let's do it now. First question, how do you usually start your day?
Oh, how do I start the day? I usually start the day by not yelling, but getting my kids up out of bed and saying, it's time to get up, everyone. It's a new day. And then I have a lovely hot shower. That is my space. So I kind of get all the kids out of bed, and then the shower is my space to kind of, it's like my ritual that moves me from being sleepy into a more action sort of.
What is your hidden talent? Can you share with us one hidden talent?
Oh, hidden talent. I'm just trying to think. I'm good at Zumba. Is that a hidden talent? I don't know. I enjoy Zumba. I'm a bit of a secret salsa dancer and Zumba. Kind of, I love doing Zumba together with all the crew here. Enjoying that. But actually, there's a lot to be said about salsa and sexuality, actually. So I don't know.
It's not a secret anymore. not a secret anymore.
That's right.
And name a person who inspired you.
Oh, a person who inspires me.
Anyone pop up in your mind?
Oh, it's really crazy because the first person that came to my mind was my mother. Yeah, my mother inspires me. I know that sounds like kind of almost lame, but she's a very inspiring woman. She's just got this beautiful spirit of generosity, and she gives, and she's happy, she's joyful in the giving. And I think that inspires me to see someone that is so wholehearted in the way that she serves other people and cares for them. And I kind of want to emulate that in my life as well, is to kind of wholeheartedly look out for the people around me and find joy in that, not to be kind of see it as a burden, but see it as a privilege. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful. And what's your favorite holiday?
Oh, favorite holiday, exotic ones. I love exploring new places. So somewhere I haven't explored before is my favorite holiday. So the next one will be Mexico. I think I'm gonna head to Mexico in very soon. So I'm looking forward to that holiday. Yeah. So
I'm sure you do. The question: what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, my go-to karaoke. Oh. Man, I feel like a woman. Man, I feel like a woman. That's really lame. That was the one that came to mind. By Shania Twain. Yeah. Oh, that's I'm not a huge karaoke person, but that was the first thing that came to mind when I imagined myself doing karaoke.
Oh, you're singing your shower.
I might have done in the past. Oh yeah, my shower singing. That's right.
Okay, last question. What is the favorite part of your job, Monica?
My favorite part of my job, I just feel so privileged to sit in a session one-on-one with someone, or even with couples, and get to talk about the deep stuff with them, that sometimes they've never talked to anyone else about in their entire life. I'm particularly passionate about men too. When men come into my clinic, sometimes they've not had a chance to talk to anyone else about their feelings, about their insecurities around sex, and I get to sit there and be a part of their life in that way. And I just feel hugely privileged of that, around that. And I learn stuff from them. I sit back and I listen to people processing through their life, and I get to kind of pull out the gems from them as well. And I love that. I love it. It nurtures me, it grows me, and we learn from each other. And so I love that part of my job. I just get to do that. I can't believe I get paid to do that. So yeah, I mean, it is hard. It is hard. I want to also say that there's joys in it, but at the end of the day, you can sometimes feel like, wow, that was intense.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Monica, for spending time with us. Like I say, we will add Monica details in our video below. And that's the end. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Everyone, we'll see you again very soon, the next time at the same place. Bye for now.